David Arthur Faraday was just a 17-year-old boy when he met Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16. The couple were smitten with each other, and was on their very first date. They had planned to go to a high school dance together, but like most teenagers do, they went to a secluded lover's lane that overlooked the city of Benicia, California, where they lived. It was out on Lake Herman Road, on a breezy cool winter night of December 20th, 1968. They had no way of knowing that in just a few short minutes after pulling up, that their young lives would sadly and tragically be over. They had the misfortune of crossing paths with the Zodiac Killer. A car pulled up next to David, who was using his mom's Nash Rambler on the date with Betty, was shot point blank in the face. Betty, witnessing the horror of what was happening, fled the vehicle, and was shot 5 times in the back. They were only just a short distance from Betty's home when they met their demise. Up until that point, no one had a clue who the Zodiac was. These were the first of many murders to be attached to the Zodiac kill count. On July the 4th the following year in 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau drove into the Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California. It was only around 5 miles from where the murders of David and Betty had been committed the previous January. They too were simply sitting in their car and talking when another car pulled up beside them. It exited as quickly as it came, but came back a few minutes later. The driver then got out of the car and walked up to the pair's car and shined a bright flashlight into their eyes. As he shined the line on their faces, he shot each of them several times. Some of the bullets even went into Michael and was lodged in Darlene. The killer started to walk away, but he heard Michael moaning, and he returned to shoot each of them in the face once more. Somehow, even after being shot several times in the face, head and chest, Michael somehow lived to tell investigators what happened. Michael described the murderer to be a white male who had light brown curly hair. He looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, and he was around 200 pounds. There appeared to be no motive for any of the killings. They didn't have to guess very long though. The following day, a call came into the local police station where a man was claiming to be the killer. He also talked about the murders the previous December. The police were able to trace the call, but unfortunately, it was a payphone just a short distance away from the station, and a short distance from where the first murders took place. There was no one there when police got there, and they couldn't find any prints. The first day of August of 1969, 3 local newspapers received a letter from a person who claimed to be the killer. Each letter included 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram, which the killer claimed contained his identity. The killer demanded they be printed on each paper's front page, or he would cruise around killing people one by one until he reached a dozen over the course of the weekend. The newspapers ran with the story, and the next thing you know, everyone was talking about the serial killer called Zodiac. In September of 1969, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a small island near Twin Oak Ridge. As they sat on the beach, not far from their car, the killer pulled up and got out. He was wearing a black hood as well as a black shirt that had a symbol printed on the front that looked like a circle with a cross in it. As he held them at gunpoint, he told the young couple that he would not hurt them, and that he only needed their car. He explained that he was an escapee and needed their car and money. Thinking that they would just be tied up and robbed, the couple was hoping they would soon be safe. Unfortunately, it was not to be. After he forced them to tie each other up, he took out a knife and stabbed each of them countless times. He then walked back and drew the cross and circle symbol on Hartnell's car door with a black felt-tip pen, and wrote beneath it, Vallejo 12-2068 7469 September 27, 69, 6:30 by knife. The next day, the Zodiac Killer once again called police, and once again, he claimed to have committed a double murder the night before. What he didn't know was that the couple he had stabbed did not die right away. After he left them there to die, they managed to yell for help, which attracted a couple of men who were there at the time. They both gave the descriptions of the killer to the police before passing out. Brian lived to tell the tale. Cecilia sadly did not. Back to the call though, the call was traced. Police sped to a car wash only 4 or 5 blocks away only to find the phone was resting at its receiver. They did manage to get a fresh palm print though, but sadly, it was never matched to anyone. On October the 11th, in nearby Presidio Heights, a white male got into the taxi cab that was driven by Paul Stein. He requested to be driven to Maple Street. For some reason, Stein drove to the next street over and pulled over, where the man in his cab took out his gun and shot him in the head. As he lay dying, the killer took out a knife and cut off a section of Stein's blood-stained shirt, robbed him of his keys and wallet, and calmly got out of the cab and started to wipe it down for prints. This was almost his undoing. 3 teenagers saw what was happening and called to report it. Somehow, there was a miscommunication between the police dispatch and the police. It was reported that the suspect was a white male, and as they approached the crime scene, the police on duty saw a man that fit the description of the killer, but was told by mistake to look out for an African-American suspect. The killer got away. By the middle of October, the newspapers were getting more letters. This time, in order to prove it was him, he sent the piece of blood-stained clothing that had been cut from Paul Stein's shirt along with the letter. This time, he demanded that 2 very important attorneys, F. Lee Bailey and Melvin Belly, appear on AM San Francisco, a talk show on KGO-TV hosted by Jim Dunbar. Dunbar asked the viewers to keep the lines open. Someone claiming to be the Zodiac called in. Belly asked the caller for a less ominous name, and the caller picked Sam. The caller said he would not reveal his true identity, as he was afraid of being sent to the gas chamber which was still used at that time. Belly arranged to meet the caller outside a shop on Mission Street in Daly City, but no one ever showed up. The call was later traced back to a patient in a mental institution. Investigators concluded that the man was not the Zodiac, simply someone who was living there. In November of 1969, the Zodiac mailed a card with another cryptogram consisting of 340 characters. This cipher, dubbed Z340, remained unsolved even to this very day. He continued to call and write letters for all of 1970, but was never seen or heard from again, or was he? In March of 1970, Kathleen Johns was driving from San Bernardino to Petaluma, California to visit her mother. She was nearly due to give birth to her second baby. Along for the ride with her was her 10-month-old daughter. As her car headed toward her destination, another car came up behind her and was flashing their lights to get her attention. She pulled over and the man explained that her tire was wobbling and that it needed to be tightened up and offered to do it for her. She politely thanked him and went on her way. She didn't make it very far before the tire actually came off. Again, the man showed up and offered to drive her and her daughter to the local shop so they could get a tow truck to get the car repaired. She accepted. You can imagine her fear after the man drove right by several shops that were open and never even tried to stop, even when she asked him to. He continued to drive for over 90 miles before pulling up to an intersection. The young mother grabbed her daughter and bolted from the car and hid in a field that was full of tall grass. The killer got out and looked for her, but thankfully, never found her. She managed to lose him and made her way to the local police department. As she was giving them the description, you can imagine her shock and horror when she saw the composite drawing of the Zodiac Killer, and it was an exact, identical match to the person who had just abducted her. She was probably mortified, thinking about how close that both she and her young child had avoided an almost certain death. The Zodiac Killer claims to have killed many more, and was a suspect in several unsolved cases both predating and after the known kills. Those cases have not been able to prove or disprove that claim. It seems the case may finally be close to potentially being solved though. Hopefully, that is. In May 2018, the Vallejo Police Department announced their intention to attempt to collect the Zodiac Killer's DNA from the back of stamps he used during his correspondence. The analysis, by a private laboratory, was expected to check the DNA against G match, which is how they finally caught the Golden State Killer, who of which we'll be doing a story on eventually. As of this writing, no results have came back yet.